Hello, fellow Minnesota birders. My name is Ben Douglas, and I was going to be the MC for the 2020 Minnesota Ornithologists Union Spring Primer. Obviously, the coronavirus that is now worldwide has put the brakes on that a little bit. A number of us that were producing that event were starting to look at ways that we could put digital content together and possibly bring a lot of those presentations to you. Now that Minnesota is under a shelter-in-place order, a number of those things are not going to happen. In the meantime, though, I'm going to bring the content that I was initially going to put together to you, and that was initially just going to be a beginner's guide to eBirding. So using the eBird application from your smartphone and getting your sightings into that tool set. Additionally, I'm starting to take a look at other opportunities like a weekly video cast where we talk about rare birds that are coming into areas that have been found in the state by individuals hopefully utilizing social distancing and still getting out and going birding. We'll talk about migration in general, and then we'll talk about some resources and different opportunities, and then maybe do some top 5, top 10 locations to bird watch at that you can practice social distancing and still find some really good birds in the process. So hold tight. We'll jump into the app in just a moment, and hope you enjoy the content. All right, welcome back, everyone. What we're looking at on screen is actually my iPad. Typically, we're going to be utilizing eBird apps from our smartphones, like our iPhone or an Android-based device. I happen to have a Samsung device that I utilize eBird from. But in this case, for the purposes of recording this, we're going to do this from an iPad. I've never had this installed on this particular device before, so we're going to go through all the steps and processes that you'll need to get an eBird app down, to get an account created, and to start your first checklist and to close it out. So I have it downloaded here. You can just download it from your app store, depending on which platform you're on, and I'm going to open it up. We're going to get a couple of welcome intro screen images and details and stuff, but if we just go to skip or get started, let's go ahead and get started. It's going to ask you for your credentials to log into the app. Now, you probably won't have those if you've never done that before, and at the very bottom in the center of the screen is Create Account. So when we do that, it'll open up a sub window that's connecting out to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's website, and you would enter your first name, last name, a username of choice, password, and an email address. And that's it. I have never had eBird ask for any additional personal information from me, phone number, address, none of that stuff is required in there. You can fill this out, and if this goes successfully, then you can close out of this window, and I'm just going to click Done. And then you enter the credentials you just created on their website for your account into these two fields here and click Sign In. This goes relatively quickly, and now you'll enter a couple of introductory screens to configure your application before you start using it. These are relatively simple, and if you start at the top where we have species name display, that's just asking you if you want to see the birds in their common name, scientific, or both. I think many normal, everyday birders probably use a common name. I'm certain there's some ornithologists out there that really love scientific names, or maybe some Latin majors, just depends. I'll leave that as common. My primary language is going to be English. Certainly you can modify that if needed. And then whether or not you want to show subspecies for data entry. Now this depends on your skill level and your interest in being able to narrow some species down to species types. So maybe you see yellow-rumped warbler and you would really prefer that you list it under myrtle for the individuals that are on the eastern side of the Rockies, or maybe you want to be able to say, oh well, if that's an Audubon, I really want to be able to segment those out as well. So you can turn that on or off as you please. And then the distance. So if you're a miles or kilometers type individual, you can make that selection there and then click Continue. The items that we just did, you can go back to those in the configurations for the app, so it's not a one and done type situation, no concerns there. And now we need to download a bird pack. So the app wants to know where you're located most of the time so that it can give you the most context-sensitive help in identifying birds and getting them listed without trying to go through the 10,000 plus bird species that exist worldwide at any given time. So let's view the suggested packs. Now, depending on how your device is set up, if the location data is available to it, it will select your location. And we can see here that Minnesota was selected. So I'm just going to do get pack because I am in fact in Minnesota, and that's where most of my birding occurs from. This download is relatively quick, though it is, of course, dependent on your data connection. I'm on a Wi-Fi connection right now, and if you were on a cellular connection or a very poor one, this might go more slowly, or if you're downloading a larger pack, it would as well. Additionally, you can see a tooltip pop up as this comes down and says you can manage packs and other settings here. So that was what I referenced a moment ago about those intro settings. So we're not going to address that right now, but this is the wonderful thing about it. We've created an account, we logged into it, set a couple of config details, and we are literally ready to start our first list. This intro splash screen then gives you a date and time. You can modify that as necessary, but it will default to today's date and the current time, so you can move that stuff around as necessary. And just as an example, if it was happened to be a different date on iPhone or iPad, you can see these modifiers down below. I'm just going to say done on that, and you can tweak the time if you need to, and maybe you say, well, I'm not going to start my list until 2 minutes from now, or whatever it might be on it, but you can back it up if you actually started 2 minutes ago, whatever it might be on there. And then record track down here at the bottom in the center, or near the bottom. That is, if you decide to keep GPS on for your device, it will record your literal track that you travel if you are hiking or walking at a specific location on there. In this case, I'm stationary in my home office, and I'm just going to turn that off, and it indicates some details to you about it, but I'm turning that off because I'm not actually going to go anywhere, so I don't need it to measure the distance that I travel in this case. And then we just click Start Checklist. All right, and because it is the first time in, we get another tooltip or two that helps kind of guide us through this process. And what this tooltip is going to do is tell us you need to select a more specific location. Now, what eBird has done is they've evolved this over time, has given us an automatic selection and get us into the list. It used to be you had to select the location and kind of go through that grinding process before you could start entering birds. But now, because the GPS coordinates, the latitude and longitude, are selected already, you can go straight into entering birds and then worry about the location details later. In this case, let's just go through that. So we'll click on that, get that out of the way. And I'm going to click right on those coordinates, and that opens up this subscreen for choosing the location. Now there's 3 different areas for this. It defaults to nearby, but let's go look at recent, even though there's nothing in there. What recent is going to be is the most recent checklists and locations of those checklists that you have entered from the device you're in. So if you routinely do things like eBird from your yard, from a local park, your neighborhood, or whatever, and you name that location, it would be available in here every time you come in, so you can just quickly grab that and check it off. Additionally, this generally works as well for nearby. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to is along the left-hand side, it is mostly or predominantly blue icons, which are personal locations. I have a personal location, the second one down, called Lake Elmo Home. That's where I live. And then I've got one for my neighborhood when I walk a little bit larger circles around that space. Down here at the bottom, though, and I'll slide this up to the top, there's one called Preserve at City Place. So somebody has created a hotspot. Now this is a hotspot anybody can see, anybody can use, and it's available to be grabbed. But you can see the icon difference between the 2 types. The blues are personal, and these orangish ones with a flame in them, those are hotspots that everybody can see, and they're much more global to the eBird data set. Now the third one is also nice. This gives us a GPS satellite view of the area that you're currently located at, and you can select a more precise location off of that, or you can move around a little bit depending on where you're at, what you're doing. If I just go down the street for me, there's an excellent park just down the street called Lake Elmo Regional Park, and there's a hotspot there. So if I tap that hotspot icon, you can see Lake Elmo Regional Park in the lower left corner has been populated. So I can say, well, that's where I'm eBirding today. Now, obviously, I'm in my home. This isn't exactly true, but we're going to just, for the sake of argument, select this. And what it's doing now is it's downloading a context-sensitive list. It's effectively looking at historical data within a certain radius of that location and saying, okay, here are the prospective birds we believe are most likely to occur in that location. And what it does is it limits down, say, the 400 plus birds in the prior iteration down to a more reasonable number that might be a couple hundred, depending on the time of year, whatever it might be. Now, additionally to that, these bird lists still are kind of long. They are presented in taxonomic order, and it can create a fairly large list. So most of your entry work will happen in the search field area, really close to the top and left. There's a little magnifying glass. So if I tap on that right now, my keyboard's going to come up, and it will allow me to start entering information. So let's say that I am watching my feeders and a chickadee comes by and I want to enter chickadee. So if I go over to the text on the keyboard, I can do CHI. And in that, a number of birds come up that all have a match somewhere in their name for the letter CHI. And black-capped chickadee is the most likely and shows up at the top. Or perhaps, in this case, it'll be alphabetical for the most common bird. What you can see directly after the bird name, black-capped chickadee has no icon right to the right edge of it. But chipping sparrow has a half circle icon, which is a slightly uncommon. And then chimney swift and boreal chickadee both have a red dot, which means they're unreported at this time of year or in this general area and location. And then they have an R icon on the far side. Anything with an R icon indicates you will have to enter more comments and information about that bird because it is considered exceedingly rare for the time of year or the location. But let's just hit the plus sign next to chickadee because we saw one of them. So we've got one chickadee on the list, and if I have to press the X on the right side of the screen next to the cancel, I'm kind of back to this view here, and I could drop the keyboard out of here, and now you can see one bird is listed on the bottom left corner. There is a blue one, well, a circle with a white one inside of it over a check mark, and now I've got chickadee in there. Now, let's say I've got an American crow. I could just continue to do CRO, crow, or whatever, and you can also enter the 4-character ABA codes for birds. So American crow is AMCR, so I can do AMCR, and that will limit the list down, and there's only one bird that is AMCR, and that's the American crow in this area. So I can get that list narrowed down really tight, and I could put a 1 in here, or a 2, or a 3, or whatever. So let's say there were 3. If I wanted to not tap the plus sign 3 times, what you can also do is enter that number first and then do your bird, AMCR. It has done the same thing. It's gone to American crow. Now instead of hitting the plus sign, hit the American crow name. And you can see what it did is it automatically filled in the number 3 for us and then just kind of reverted us back to the prior list state that we were in. It actually scrolls to where that bird is so that you don't lose sight of it. Now, additionally, there are other ways to, or at least one other way to put a bird into something. So let's say, I don't know, we got our first eastern bluebird. It's just about the right time for eastern bluebirds to be coming into areas. So if I want to do EABL, there's eastern bluebird. If you don't have a number attached to this, you can then click on the actual bird name and it'll open up a subscreen for observation details. The first of which is simply the number. So you could enter a number in here. Let's say there were 4 eastern bluebirds in there. But you have additional information in here, and there's actually the comments field at the bottom I referenced a moment ago, that if you have a really rare bird, this is the comment you would be required to fill in and provide as many details as you can, because the more you can, the more helpful it is for the scientists, those individuals analyzing data, to understand when rarities occur, where they occur, what the circumstances were, and things of that sort. Additionally, in here, kind of wedged between the number and the comments, is breeding code. Now, this is not a required field, but it is optional. It's something you can fill in if you have the knowledge and know how to do it. I know how to use a number of these because a few of them are fairly, straightforward, like flyover, singing bird, and what have you. Some of them I don't understand very well, and I don't use those ones. And again, a lot of this is not required. But something I do like to do is use the flyover code when a bird that I've seen has flown over the location and not actually landed in it. This at least helps other individuals that are looking for birds as well, if they happen upon your record in eBird, to realize that might not be a place that I go to try and find that bird because it just flew over there. It's not actually resident there, or wasn't actually seen on the ground perched, maybe trying to set up territory and what have you. So again, the comments are down here. You can tap into that open space and you can type those comments. So I could just say birds flew over without stopping. So there I've put a comment in and I can click done. Now, I've entered birds, and I can tap on that blue circle down in the bottom left, and that will actually focus my list down to only the birds that I have entered into this particular list, which is really nice and helpful to say, okay, well, what have I done? Have I gotten everything that I think I saw? You can actually see now an eastern bluebird on the right-hand side. You can see the breeding code there and a little text bubble icon indicating that I've entered a comment in that space. Well, let's say, oh yeah, I completely forgot. I saw I don't know, red-winged blackbird, 2 of them, and didn't enter them into my list. So I never remember the 4-letter code for red-winged blackbird, but I do know that you can do RW and you will get there. So it's probably RWBL, but I don't really know what it is. I don't memorize all of the codes. So you can kind of figure this stuff out for yourself just by entering some letters about the bird, and you should be able to narrow that list down. So let's add those into there. And now we've got this list that we believe to be complete. I was only out there for, say, 10 minutes. It wasn't very long, so there's not a really big list in it. And now that's mostly it. We can go into review mode. So in the lower right corner, I'll tap review. And we are presented just a couple of bits that we have to fill in. Now, in this case, if this list is happening at Lake Elmo Regional Park, it is a location where there's a lot of trail space, a lot of hiking or whatever. But let's say I went there, I got out of the car, and I just sat around the parking lot in a stationary capacity. So you could use stationary list for that. And you will have a little bit of a sub-menu kind of pop up for stationary, and it'll say, how many observers were there? Well, it's just me. I was by myself. I'm practicing social distancing right now. And then minutes. So how long was it? So instead of knowing exactly the minutes, what you can do is hit the little timer icon in here, and it will autofill that in based on the time in the upper left corner that you started the list at and what time it is right now. So a really fast way to pop that information in there. The third field you'll see is grayed out, and that is for miles. That's the distance traveled. Now, if you remember all the way back when we started this list, there was a slider for recording the track. If you choose to record your track, this will automatically fill as you begin to close this list out, and it will say, here's how much distance you've traveled, and it's all about the GPS tracking mechanisms in your phone. Additionally, though, if I just set this to a traveling list, I could also estimate this and put it in manually. So I could say, well, I went a quarter mile, a half mile, whatever it might be in that space. In this case, we're still going to call it a stationary list, so there should be no distance indicated. And now the next question is it a complete checklist? So eBird would really like for any list that is 5 minutes or longer in duration, and of which you have entered every bird you were able to identify. It doesn't mean you were able to identify every bird. It just means that you made every effort possible to identify the birds you saw, and you've put them on this list. Now, if you went out specifically for, say, a rare bird, entered that bird in, and ignored a bunch of others, it's probably a better idea to say, nope, it's not a complete list because I didn't actually try and put all of them on there. So just a few rules to go by. In this case, I'm going to say yes, it was a complete list, and then I could hit the submit button. Once you submit, it is done. You'll get an OK button that will pop up when it is completed, and that's it. It is done from this standpoint. I'm not going to submit this one because we just fabricated this list, so I'm going to click hide in the upper right corner, and I'm going to come back down to here, and we'll just really quickly go through a couple other screen pieces on this, but that's it. It's really simple to begin getting your data into eBird, and then you can start going to the eBird website and look at your account and look at aggregations of your data, all kinds of fun stuff in there for those that really like to dig into that. On the bottom icon row, though, we've got submit, which is highlighted right now, which is what we're on. Trips, checklist, my eBird, and more. But I just want to go to checklist real quick, and we can see this unsubmitted checklist in here. Additionally, you'll be able to see other checklists that you have submitted before. Now, if you submit a checklist, and let's say you got back to your car, and you submit your checklist, and the most classic bird thing happens possible. You hit the submit button and you suddenly hear a pileated woodpecker call in the woods. So you can come back into your app, go over to the submitted checklist, open that checklist back up, and you can edit it right on the app, enter the pileated woodpecker, and then submit. And you can just do this all within here. This is really nice. It never used to be a thing. eBird has updated this app several times over the years, and now you can do that inline. It's really nice. I'll let you explore some of these other features on your own. The two most important are your submit and your checklists. And as I noted earlier, in the more, you can come back into this and download more bird packs if you're going to other states on a regular basis or once. If you're going to leave the country and you're going to go somewhere in Central America, South America, you want to get those packs downloaded in advance because then you can eBird stuff. Even if you're offline, you should be able to create lists off of that stuff. So that's it. That's all you need to begin eBirding. If anyone is interested, please comment on this video. I would certainly be interested in providing additional content around looking at your lists on the eBird website and using the eBird website further. So if you have interest in that kind of content, comment on the types of things you're interested in seeing, and I'll see if we can put some of that together. Until then, happy birding and maintain your social distance.